And today I'm going to talk a little bit about Sean Bell. Don't really want to, but my good friend Professor Spence has weighed in on the subject, not particularly conclusively. He threw a lot of stuff out there, which is swirling around in his mind when he thinks about what should be said about a case like this. I just kind of look at the particulars. I wasn't really going to comment on it, but the interesting thing that he said was whether a certain set of police tactics are considered normal, and so that when you have a judge deciding a case rather than a jury, that the judge will consider what is considered normal for police action. What does a reasonable judge think a reasonable police officer should do, rather than what a reasonable man thinks a reasonable man should do. And if we get into the kind of voir dire of what a reasonable New Yorker thinks about what a reasonable New York black man should do, or how they should be treated, then you get into all kinds of things like that. So when I first read the story, I got my information from Wikipedia. It's obviously 2 years old since the actual incident, and then the verdict was handed down last week or recently, in the past few days. I said, okay. Well, the thing that struck me were the fact that, first of all, the incident happened at 4 in the morning. Not a lot of good things can happen at 4 in the morning when you're at a strip club. And there were already 3 undercover officers at the scene. So here you are at a bachelor party, and admittedly, okay, you're going to be at a bachelor party, and a strip club is, I suppose, a reasonable place to have a bachelor party. But they get into a scuffle, an argument with one of the performing women, and somebody says, I'm going to go get a gun. And at that point, it's basically, all hell breaks loose, and then you realize, I think a reasonable person would say, what am I doing in a strip club at 4 o'clock in the morning having a fight with a hooker? And somebody says, I'm going to go get a gun. That's a pretty dangerous situation. It pretty much kind of invalidates a lot of stuff in terms of, it's funny that Spence said cops should act like Andy Griffith. But this is, a strip club in Queens at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'm not going to overemphasize that. The bottom line was that people ran out to their cars. The unfortunate victim didn't treat the undercover officer as if he was actually an undercover officer, a police officer, and like to ran over him with his car. And I kind of went on a little bit of that tangent, which is, does a reasonable person see a black man with a gun at 4 o'clock in the morning and think he's an undercover police officer? Probably not. Then again, if there's going to be a gunfight, you would hope that they are a police officer. So I'd be kind of relieved on if I wasn't completely overcome with shame by the fact that I got busted in a hoe fight. At any rate, all of those negative, seedy, disgusting circumstances notwithstanding, it is not right or proper for someone to lose their life over those kinds of circumstances. But you can certainly see how things could go radically wrong. They started off not too good in the first place. And you have to ask also, what is the expectation, really in terms of what do New York cops see? And what do New York cops see in such kind of situations? How bad do they get? How bad have they gotten? I would certainly consider, first of all, the undercover officer's experience with being, on an assignment, dealing with obviously the criminals and racketeers and the people who own a strip club. I mean, probably not far from what you see on The Sopranos and HBO, about how ugly those situations can go. And I'm sure that those undercover officers have seen more of their share of dead bodies, people killed for no good reason at all. And they're probably a better judge than most of us are to say how close that particular strip club was to seeing death and destruction. Obviously, the place was under investigation. The police have an interest in closing it down. They're looking for people who are crossing the line between the barely legal and the certainly illegal, with the intent of getting rid of this place, which is obviously a menace to the community. If you have 3 undercover cops in a place which is obviously a threat to the community, you have to ask yourself, how are community people putting themselves in danger? And why does it have to be an undercover sting anyway? Why has the community not done anything to shut this place down? Or are they leaving that up to the cops? So when it comes to what a reasonable person should do, I also think about what a reasonable person should think about such a club in their neighborhood, and what they expect to see going on there when a place is open at 4 o'clock in the morning. Obviously no good. So there's a certain amount of danger that Sean Bell obviously put himself into, and he's probably, well capable of taking care of himself. But here's a situation that just got out of hand, and I think it does make sense to look at what a reasonable person thinks the police ought to be doing in a reasonable situation, in a dangerous situation. Also, I'm very acutely aware of the extent to which people are not doing their job. That is to say, if you as a citizen feel at some point that Bell can be excused, that he has a right to go to a strip club for whatever purposes as a private citizen at 4 in the morning, then are you also the kind of person that thinks of the police as a separate breed of human being? That is to say, if it is obvious to a cop that this is a strip club that ought to be shut down and we ought to do anything we can to get rid of it, and you on the other hand as a citizen say it's our right to have strip clubs with hookers and all that stuff and let people do what they want to do, then does the reasonable standard actually work? Or does it become an us versus them kind of thing, which says, well, if the police are going to go around shutting down strip clubs, we can't support that. If they're obviously going to have guns and they think people are dangerous, then we can't have that. Then if that's your position as a citizen, then you have to think what kind of dichotomy we are setting up between ordinary people and the police. Obviously, it's not an ideal situation. Obviously, the community was unable to shut the club down and keep people like Bell out of there. And so it's a failure all around. But it also is a question of what is our expectations of police and what should they be doing, when there's dangerous clubs and prostitution going on at the early wee hours of the morning. This is Michael David Cobb Bowen for Cobb Vision. Shutting out.